and we say assisted by AI. And of course, with that, we mean assisted by, we do smart things behind the scenes, not necessarily, oh, we analyze all the data and we do machine learning, okay? So that's the first thing that I think I want to get out of the way, that when we say AI, we just mean smart stuff. Okay, I don't know how familiar you are with model-based development. I think it was hot like a while back, and then it kind of went away, and now I think it's, with all the low-code movement, it's kind of hot again. But let's see. I made a quick agenda here. Let's talk about the strong points of what we have. And then I thought we'll talk about some of the limitations that I see. And then I want to map, just a demo, what's coming up. And we divided it into 3 different things. It's the page mapping module, the data flow, and the AI engine that we have. And then I'll just touch quickly on the roadmap, what we have going forward, and then our long-term goals, and then we'll take some questions. Okay, very cool. And I think if you want to make this interactive, if there's something you don't understand, because it is pretty, like it takes a while to get your head around it, the actual how it's implemented, I think it's better you just interrupt me so we can discuss it. Okay, let's talk about the strong points of the current setup. I mean, we have pretty good test coverage. Haven't worked on it actively the last couple of months so much because it's been more doing AI testing and other things. But let's look at what we have. Of course, we do, we have the whole Cucumber implementation with features, which is very much like end user focused. If you do a product order, if you do, the group discounts, if you do that, if you do this. So it has very much to do with the feature focus, end-to-end focus. But if we look at the details, what makes it powerful is the fact that we have this natural language element selectors, which means we can say, if you create product A, and then you add a discount to product A, then we order product A, we can carry along that product A as data throughout the flow. So that way it's very, I think it's very, what do you call that? It's just very easy to create adaptable tests and data-driven tests and still have few test cases, right? Another things we have a lot, especially for you guys, for PivoHub, is the fact that we use a lot of action and group loops. So for instance, let's say I create order ID 123, 124, 125, 126, 128. I can just put this in a vector, and then in a later time in the flow, I can say, then I select 125, 126. So it's a lot of stuff that we can do with one action, being a loop that clicks a checkbox or does something, and then it carries it over to a different steps. And that makes it a really reusable and powerful, Another thing that we do a lot in the PivoHub case, one case is, for instance, when you add a discount or a special price, or some sort of invoice management, is the fact that in the data, I can say, what is the invoice policy? And then I use like a keyword like bset skip. So it's an if condition to kind of add an invoice or add like a discount or something. So I can drive data that drives the conditional logic downstream, which allows me to build a table that says this should have no discount versus this should have a 15% discount. Even if the 15% discount, sends you off on a different flow, I can control that with data upstream, okay? And then we also use regular expression data generators, that allows us to say the alcohol percentage should be randomized between this and this, the name should be randomized between this and this, and maybe the beer type should be alt beer or this or that. And that way we get some exploratory testing too, where we select different things in the application every time we run the tests. And then I think you've seen our reports on, because we use Cucumber, we have, it's open source and we get a really good report from Cucumber. And we do keep, we can keep down, that's a copy paste error in my presentations. But we also have root cause analysis to show us like where is the real problems in the setup. So this is about the current setup that we have right now. I know this was very theoretical, and I know some of you are new, so I don't know if you've seen in detail what we do with our tests, but does this make sense so far? Okay, cool. Okay, it's good. Like, it's a lot of stuff that how we do certain things and why we do them. Uh, so if you look at the cucumber test here, it was good that I put one in. This is a data-driven cucumber test. And the way it works is basically just a set of given conditions. And of course, those are saying what is the state that we want to start with. And then you have one or several when conditions. Usually you have like one operation. What is it that I want to test? And then you have the post conditions. What should the state of the system be afterwards? So here you can see a little bit dirty, but still elegant test. So in the cucumber world, if you do these kind of things, some would argue that this is a little too detailed. Like why aren't you really talking about the business thing? But here I would argue that the fact that I'm saying I really want to check that the price that the deposits for certain formats and the tax rates are a certain way, I can actually put in all these values because I know that this is what they should be according to the tax law of Quebec and because of the deposits that you have in Quebec. And then I can create data-driven tests like this. So I think you see pretty clearly what the strength is here. Because of course it creates a lot of flexibility to be able to create a test like this where you can test many things. For instance, one familiar problem is when you have the 99.5, the 0.5 cents, that it gets rounded the wrong way and stuff like that. So you can actually put in specific numbers in here to catch certain rounding errors and common problems, with the JavaScript floats and all kinds of stuff, right? So I think you see that there is a flexibility to be able to do this. And also, of course, given I am a brewer and I add a product with the format and I set all these are reusable test steps where I can override any part of this data. So I think this is one of the strengths with this kind of test is that you can use the test step and then you can you can have default data set on all of them and then you can single out and override the data you want to for that business case. So I don't know if this is new to you. The idea is that a cucumber test, the reason why you have a lot of given conditions is the fact that it should not rely on the state that your system is in before. It should take the system to the state. So the problem with that is, of course, that you can't say, oh, first I do this, and then I want to test this, and then I want to do that. The not so good thing about this is that sometimes the given condition will take a long time to run. The good thing about this is that you can parallelize tests because they're not dependent on each other. So let's talk about some of the not so good things about this approach, or especially if you know what's underneath here. And I would say the problem here is scalability and overview. Like we have maybe in total 100 scenarios, which is, it's not a lot, but it's you're starting to feel the scalability problems. And what you feel is, for instance, let's say I want to go in here and I want to say, I set the price to price and I want to update this and refactor this test. I'm kind of making a lot of assumptions, what is carried forward, etc. So when I want to update this test, it can kind of have some unexpected side effects to other places I have the wording and I set the price to price. The other thing would be, the most important thing is no automated dependency handling. What that means is I've designed all these given clauses, given I am a brewer, and I add a group A, and I add a retailer, And then okay, if I have group set, should I automatically add that retailer to a group? I have to kind of encode this in all the tests, and then I got to remember those rules to be able to know how do I stack dependency testing when you have complex testing such as inventory allocations into groups and stuff like that. So I gotta kind of keep that in mind all the time. And then of course the given clauses are not exchangeable, right? The order of them actually makes sense here. So I gotta make sure that if I have a group test, I gotta do that first, and then I gotta do the other one. So there's a lot of implicit logic that I have to encode into the test. And then of course no intelligence, right? What I want to say here is maybe not given, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 given steps, right? Ideally, I want to say, given I have a product with format and deposit ready to order, whatever, that's one line. And then it would automatically unravel all the dependencies and bring my data to that point in time, right? So if it could automatically unravel everything, I wouldn't have to kind of hard code all these steps that depend on each other, okay? And then a note, no automated ergodic checking on forms. We do have some early AI action for this, but it's not implemented. So basically, if we knew exactly what data all the forms could take, we could bombard it and do what we called, I think it's called ergodic checking, basically saying, let's see if all the data fields are within the bounds that this only accept this, and if you put that, you have an error message, etc., etc. So that's some of the limitations we have right now. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's new to me too. Wensheng told me this is the word. So I trust Wensheng on English here. But I looked it up and it seemed kind of to be the right word. But I think you understand, like, form data compliance, I think makes sense here. Okay, so now I want to talk about how we may be able to address this. And of course, this is just beta functionality right now. We're trying to get this out in our next release, and this will be the major release. It will be the generation 6 of the Boozang tool, and it's the biggest release so far. And all our releases have been pretty big, so that says a lot. And we kind of, we divided into 3 parts. We divided into the UI mapper, and then we divided into the workflow engine, and then we do the AI engine. And the way we look at it is the UI mapper tells you where are different modules with the data. And then the workflow engine is what is the logic between the test, right? What goes to the next thing, and what are you trying to test? And then you have the AI engine that just takes that information and builds tests on the fly. So I'm just going to demo really quickly what that would look like. And remember, this is in beta, so there might be some bugs, which there might be anyways when you're doing demos, but in this case in particular. And the way I would like to kind of, the way we're doing it is that everything in Boozang stays the same. And then, so there is nothing new in Boozang in the UI. So when you're operating normally with feature files or with tests, nothing changes. We just introduced a new button here, the AI module. And when you go into the AI module, you would actually kind of just open up a new view in Boozang. So it's not supposed to affect anything that is currently in Boozang. Only thing I'm going to cheat by doing is I'm just going to copy a URL right now, because I know I'm going to need this URL and it's so easy to make a mistake on it. So this is the URL. And I'm just going to start from the beginning, and then I'm going to go into something ready-made that we know is working. So I'm just going to create a very, very simple thing. Here's a lot of information. I wouldn't worry about it too much. We want to do the last thing. This is just a data module. This is probably going to boil down to 2 or 3 options in the end. And what we're going to call this is, I'm just going to mimic the product module. So we're just going to look at product creation and see how that works, how you would start doing product creation. So I would call this something as product. I already have a product module, so I gotta figure out something. Let's call it product theme, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I'll just put this URL here. So the way it works is that if you go in and you step into the product, I know you're not all very familiar with the test tool. When you have an AI module, you get a new view on the side here. So, I mean, you can still switch to the other views, the card view, all the different views. It's just you get another view where you can actually map out the test case. And if I go in here, for instance, and I would create, let's say here, module link. Let's make sure. Let's see if this is working. Yes, it's working. So I'm working out of Wencheng's account now, so it's not affecting all the other tests. So what we want to start by doing is just kind of create a map of the product creation. So what we're doing is actually we're going to create a map of the user interface. So the way we do that is simply picking out the elements, and you want to try and hit the, and then you try to classify what each element is, and what it's going to think this is a module entry. It's not. It's the operation create for the product module, okay? So as soon as you do this, it's actually automatically going to say, oh, create. So now we're getting a new form here, okay? And now I can actually use the play button to see that I'm always having a good path, that I'm always on the way to the next screen. So now we can actually start by kind of just kind of see that, okay, this is good so far. And then I can build by just picking out elements. I can start building a hierarchy. And now I'm just going to hard code beer here. But very often you see how it knows that this is the data type and the type. So it's actually able to kind of build the whole user interface. And the idea is this, right? That you would always tell it when it's data, and then you would basically just build the, so for instance here, I know this is a next button, so it will just take me through the user interface, and this would be bound to the data type. So there's two important concepts. You will have, for a module, you will have a type and you will have a state of that module. So as you can see, it will automatically navigate me to the product form. And now I can actually start mapping out what is this product form. So I can do, we can basically, I think we can capture this whole page. Of course, for each and individual things, you would need to go in and make adjustments and say, hey, this is actually, your guess is wrong. I thought I put this on the do not disturb, but I think it's still there. So let's see here. Here we see, of course, a number of things caught. So you see here, it's catching something in the background here. We don't want that. We don't need that. We see the submit in the back, it's catching. We're going to kill that. I'm just not going to catch these. I don't want the cancel button. I don't want the back button. I don't want the save the draft, but I want the submit button. I want the product name. You can see in the form, right, what we're getting. And then you see that it did some wrong guesses here. It catches this as an enum. You see the second one there? That one is a bad catch. And then it says that this is a string. This is not a string, the select. This is an enum, for instance. So you see all the guesses are not good because it's material design. But the idea is, of course, that you can just rename these and make them nice. And then, of course, you can go in and go into individual path and set these. But, of course, what you can do here is very quickly map out the form. No, right now it's like this. You have to go in afterwards and edit it. Because our element paths are getting so good, so maybe we catch it right 95% of the time now. Maybe a little more. So it's almost better. Well, the way I do it is this. I would actually go in here to make sure that the path is right. I would go through and I would just fill the forms. I'll hit this little keyboard. And then it will, my computer is the slowest in the world, but it will just basically take and just, of course here I probably want to go in and be like, I want my description to do this, but what it uses a lot, for instance, the select button would be very tricky, okay? So we will see if it manages to do that. That's usually something that it doesn't, yeah, that it can't do. So here I would go in and I would say, hey, something is wrong here, and as you see, this needs to be like, but what I would do is I would just actually catch it first and then go in and make sure everything is all right and then adjust the element path. So for instance here, the way you want to, if you want to do a good enum in material design, you want to catch this, if I can catch this right hand, sometimes it's a little tricky. Hello. There. Sometimes if you do that, you actually get a good one. Let's see if that one is good. But sometimes this stuff you gotta play around a little with. But I think this one, I would just hit this. I would do this as well. Let's see. One trick when you don't want to kind of list all the stuff you have. So sometimes you just want to put random in it, and we will read what's inside the drop down, and it will automatically randomize one of the values. So you see now I can kind of refill it, and it's just gonna give me, well, not ideally it will just take a random value out of this, or I can hard code it, and then if I want to override this later, I would just override it. So does that make sense? Cool. So the cool thing here is that suddenly, if you do this right, if I close anything, regardless of what page I'm in, I should be able to, for instance, go in here and just say, let's say I can double click this to fill it, right? So let's say I would just want to double click this. It should be able to take me anytime into the interface, and it would kind of load the page, click all the way to where we are. So let's just make sure that it manages to do this. And what you would do is here, the reason why it's not clicking, well now it's actually clicking, is the fact that here the default behavior is 50% on, 50% off. So it's all regular expressions, right? So here I can say always on, always off. I could have some rule for it. You know, you can do whatever you want here. But it's very good that the default is just pick a random number in either, you know, check it, uncheck it, etc. But you can see how you could build up hierarchically like the whole map of the application using this kind of system. Now I can show you, if you do a little more work and you're a little more skilled than me, like what it can look like when you map out a little more. So I prepared something. This is like a cooking show. So I prepared something here that is a little more, you know, ready to work. So here we have the same product with all the fields. Do you see here there is like a little red star, and then you see these guys are you know, they have like a strike over. The key here is the fact that, of course, it's very dangerous if you will have to create a form for beer, one form for coffee, one form for... So there'll be a lot of forms. So what you want to do is you want to reuse the same form. But of course, for coffee, there is no alcohol, for instance. So what you can do here, you can see that, for instance, alcohol percentage has a little question mark on it. And I'm just going to show you something. Now, I can actually just go like this. I can just switch out and say, for instance, now I'm doing coffee. And you can see how the alcohol gets strucken out. This means we can reuse this form, and it will be context aware and aware of the data type. So that way all our forms can do like really, you can do really cool stuff. One thing is, of course, yeah. So the configure is actually like, if I close this one, I have a setting here, and in here I have a number of data types, but the way I would configure it is simply going into an individual field. There you have a dependency tab, and the dependency is just a regular expression. The cool thing with this is that it's a little bit complex, but what's cool about it is that I can put dependencies on anything. So that means, for instance, we have a very interesting case where if I go into group, for instance, I'm just going to show you and see if we can see. Yeah, this, right? Minimum. So I'm just going to hit play here and see if it manages to navigate me directly to the group. So you see that one, right? This one has like, if you click this one, you can fill this, otherwise you cannot. But the cool thing is now I can use the same dependency code here to just say, hey, minimize items not empty, right? I basically put a dependency on that field, you see. So that yeah. The cool thing is that when you have generalized dependency, I can also put dependency on some data, and then I can say, I'm just going to have a context object that I can say, for instance, okay, I have a context object that says this user is, so we have some default things that we do, right? We say, hey, I'm just going to show you what we default assume that is going to be like very important is, of course, if this loads quick enough, would be, for instance, let's do okay, I'm gonna show it to you later, but what I mean is you have the data status, which is kind of the status of the data, like created, deleted, and we also have for orders, we have like ready for order. I'm gonna show you that so you see clearly how that would work. So if we take I go back into product, and I can show you for PivoHub specific, something that you might not agree with, but it's very effective, is the fact that the format is a submodule of product, okay? And in the format you have, here is a UI bug, so I'm just going to reload this page. This is a known problem where it doesn't update the page. So what you're seeing is that, we're going to get to that very soon. So what you see is that what we do is we put the format as a sub-module to product, and because all the formats have availability and price and inventory, we actually put those as attributes for the format. That way, we can do a lot of the business logic. So what you can also see is that if you do that, let's see if I didn't lose my trail of thought. Yes, here. So if I do this. Yeah. So here you have data status. So here you have created, deleted, and then the idea is also that you can say the format is ready for order, which means I can have an order dependency on ready for order, but I can also create these meta states, which is like sold out or invisible, and I can define them however I want, and then I just have to tell you how do you get to that point. So now we get to another part of this. Let's say we map out the UI. The UI is mapped out. Every time I click, it fills on it. I'm happy with the values. It always finds the element. Now we just do basic data flows where we say, okay, let's say you have a start state, and then usually you have a created state for, that would be a product is created, and it has, you see, there is one product, and you create the format, right? And then what we do is all the then condition, all the post conditions, we leave open. Because we don't believe that we could use any AI or any magic to say what is supposed to happen after I've done that. So we let you define it. And then basically you can, I can just show you the default things we have is role, basically saying, you know, if you have different roles you sign in with, you have data type, and then you also have a bunch of dependencies. But it's actually quite straightforward, because now I can say, okay, I want to get to an order that is ready for order, but I want to, for instance, override specific data. So here I can actually choose whatever data I want to override, And because this is kind of already been mapped in the UI, I can just pick whatever data I want and I can override it on any level. So I could, for instance, say, I want the product ready for order, but I want the group allocation to be 10 and the general allocation to be 100. And then when I say, when I place an order, I want to order 20 of an item. And then in the then condition, I would have to manually provide how many should it be. But the idea is to kind of automatically unravel all those dependencies and kind of give me a wizard for how to kind of build what do you want, and then I can do that directly in this workflow engine. So here for ready to order, I can simply add, I can simply just add another step, with a plus. So I can create another, I could create a new, whatever here, ready for returns. That doesn't make sense, right? But I could create anything I want here, and it should, maybe a bug, but maybe it's like that, ready for returns. Okay, sorry, no bug. So I can actually just do this, and then I can tell you what is the operation needed to get me to this data state. So the idea is it's a way to kind of create a number of predefined data states, and the data state is like macro states. And then I can also say, well, I want the inventory to be this, or I want that to be this, where I can override selected data, and then it would automatically actually build these kind of cucumber tests for me. So I get this kind of, there is one group, there is one product, there is one format. When I make sure I'm in the current role, I configure that, I configure price, I configure whatever and then I can say, what's the end scenario. So it's kind of just it's a way to kind of map out the whole interface and then have a workflow engine that just kind of builds the tests for you. So of course I spent so many months of building up the test for PivoHub, so this doesn't instantly replace it, but it does create a parallel universe where I can build stuff using a wizard from the ground that is a little more tidy when you have like, a clear workflow engine, you have a clear mapping to different pages, and clearly, when you have a UI update, I only have to go to that page, let's say this updated, and I update that specific field, and all the tests get regenerated, right? So if I do this, if I go into any of these tests, you see here, for instance, add format, whatever that is, this is completely dynamic data, and I can regenerate it now in no time at all, right? So it's completely generated on the fly based on the workflow engine and based on the mapping in the form. So I think that's actually kind of, you can see if I would just kind of pick something here, we should be able to take, I've been playing around with this, but I should be able to just take, for instance, an add product scenario and just see if it runs. The idea is that when this gets more stable and stable, right, then I should be able to have all the tests running or like many failing, but it should be very predictable and it should be based on these kind of rules. And it should be, as long as my mappings are good, it should automatically be able to handle kind of the bigger picture, right? So we make sure our mappings are good, I'll run it, and then it should all run. And it shouldn't be so much maintenance, or it should also be very easy to expand. So that's the idea. But as you can see, there is a level of complexity to it. But it's more fun than to record and replay a bunch of tests. I can tell you that, because you kind of got to think a little bit, right? It's a different. It requires a little more brain power, which makes it fun. No, it interacts in the way that because it's generating cucumber tests, I can inject and use these tests I can start replacing test steps in our product suites with these ones. But what I'm thinking of doing it is like, I think the idea would be to start by making sure that this is running in its own silo and that it's powerful, and that will provide us with, oh, these are new tests being provided by the AI that it does well, and we will catch more bugs, and then slowly but surely as the AI matures, I will start swapping out test steps from the old way to the new way. So there's a transition there, but we're not quite there yet. So I think that's the idea. Yeah, exactly. It works both ways. I can completely create a manual verification. Like, then I want to see, and I can just go in and hard code a bunch of assertions or make sure that I can hit an edit link. The then statement, in the beginning, and I think this, I can take some credit here. Wenching was about kind of auto generating the then statements, and then we realized with the best AI you can do is try to remove as much of the work to get to the condition, and then when you want to validate something, leave it completely free up to the user to do whatever they want. And I think this is a good philosophy to have in testing. Who knows what your application logic is? No AI can do that. But to automate given condition to get to a data state and to automate operations when I do something, this a computer can do. But then the expectation a human should do that work.